everyone. So we're back with a third episode with Jim Anspach. Well, I think that to summarize it all, so we talked about the past, we talked about the present, and now we're going to talk about the future. Where is our industry going to? So, Phil, I think I'm going to hand it over to you.
I appreciate that, David.
Where do you think we should start?
Yeah, first of all, I'm going to say that my geographic location's changed a bit. I'm now actually in the Forum office in Israel and really enjoying the weather. It's absolutely incredible to go from minus 10 Celsius to plus 30 Celsius in a 12-hour flight period. So really love it. Now, except for that, I'm not going to get into all the technicalities of traveling across continents. I really want to hear about the future and the tools which are in development today and how they're going to interact with the new standards with ASCE 38 and ASCE 75 and Jim's outlook in terms of these new standards which are just on the doorstep of actually being published and the interaction with all these new interfaces and all these new technologies which are going forward. Jim?
Yeah, recently at Iowa State University, we were conducting a research project for AASHTO, and we were interviewing a colleague in Maryland State Highway Administration, Bill Johnson, and he voiced this term utility utopia or utilitopia. And I thought that was a kind of a place I'd want to live in. And the images that conjures up, I'm sure, are different for everyone. But to some degree, I think if we figure out our own vision of what utilitopia might be, we can march towards it. And, maybe that's the fact that if we have a utility being placed in the ground, we record its accurate position. We couldn't used to do that without significant cost and effort by a licensed surveyor. But with the new National Geodetic Survey datum 2022 being rolled out, more accurate with smartphones and other devices that allow us to get fairly accurate and in some cases increasingly accurate and precise measurements by the layman with enough checks and balances to make certain that the data is good. We can, in fact, capture all of that data on utilities that are exposed for maintenance or being put in the ground for the first time or being relocated on projects. Wouldn't that be great? And that's really what ASCE 75, our new ASCE Utility as Constructed standard, is about. So I think we have, this core.
Are we talking about a quilt where every time you have another layer, you add it onto that quilt until you have a full quilt or full coverage?
Yeah, so each project has a certain project area, and if you do a competent utility investigation within that area, but you start getting strings of the inside that patch of the quilt, so to speak. So the patch itself is mostly whatever quality level is achieved, or if you're using ASCE 38, and the strings or the points within that quilt that are the actual recorded positions surveyed of exposed utilities. You'll start to connect these patches together with data. Now, it's going to take a long time to get a full picture, but you have to start somewhere. And I'm happy to say that ASCE's new as constructed utility standard will put forth a mechanism to allow that to happen in a standardized format moving forward. We also developed it in mind that it would be compatible with the new open geospatial data standard, the MUDDI model, the model for underground data definition and integration, where we're being able to record everything under the ground that you can't see in some fashion so that it marries with the above ground BIM models that are out there. So the underground, the hidden stuff that is uncertain doesn't fit well into BIM. But the MUDDI model was designed specifically to integrate with BIM so that you get a mix of reality with BIM or certainty anyway, and a mix of uncertainty with the MUDDI model associated with it. So both ASCE 38 and 75 are compatible and were designed to be compatible with that new MUDDI model, which is under trial right now in New York City. So through a National Science Foundation grant and New York University. So it's exciting. We have this cornucopia of technology now that is really coming into its own in the past 10 years. And, we've got to figure out which fruits to pluck out of that cornucopia and use on a project by project basis. But there's lots of them producing more and more data. And I think that data management is really the next era of Utilitopia, so to speak, is figuring out what data is good, what data is bad, what data is somewhere in between, figure out how to use that data effectively, fix it, correct it, add to it, and manage it for the benefit of all going forward.
Jim, do you see with the advent or the minimizing of computers, like I remember 20 years ago you had a laptop which was 1 gig. Now that fits in the palm of your hand. Do you see that being a real factor in terms of digitization? Or are we looking at digitization again as a drawback? Because visualization is great, but if it's not verified, it doesn't help.
Yeah, I think it's a two-edged sword. It can go either way. And, the GIS community had it right back in the late 80s when they said garbage in, garbage out. And, there's a lot of garbage in there already. And I think what we need to do in this decade is figure out what is garbage and what isn't, get rid of the garbage and replace it with something useful.
Do you see actually municipalities or owners investing in that? Because all these years there's been a shyness to invest money into records or into a non-revenue generating sector.
I'm not so sure that it is money driven as much as we might believe. Now, I could be wrong on this, but it seems to me we have the technology. It exists already. To get good data and to keep it and manage it. We have the processes in place to do it. What we don't have are the policies. We have lip service to some policies, but we don't have national policies, local policies, regional policies, industry policies that will address the needed issues. So I don't think it's as much a matter of money as we might think. It's a matter of lack of leadership from those who develop policy.
Have you seen any technologies that have really caught your eye in the last couple of years? Or even for me, the standard split box or the radio detection box or the VVAX or whichever one you may use has really revolutionized from tubes all the way to chips, and being a lot more compact than they used to be, and doing a lot more functional items.
Well, it's doing more functional items, but it's also not as efficient digitally as it was analog. So again, if you know how to use all of those functions and you understand its limitations now that it is a multi-frequency, uh, therefore antenna compromised unit, you can use it well. But we don't have training for those, or we don't avail ourselves of the training on how to use that equipment to its fullest. But to answer your question on are there technologies that
Are
catch my
there
eye? Sure, there are, and there's quite a few, and it's been a constant, 40-year uh, uh, journey to try to identify those technologies that are put in front of you and separate those that have usefulness from those that are just a shiny object uh, that don't work and somebody's trying to scam you or trying to make money. They're really not addressing the problem. So I can tick off some of those technologies, and then we can talk about each one separately, perhaps. Multi-channel GPR
Let's
uh,
do that.
is a really good uh, new technology that is very exciting in what it can do and the data it can produce. I think the capturing the Bluetoothing and of your pipe and cable locator with survey to create and capturing of attributes of the pipe and cable locator so that it can be looked at remotely for quality assurance and have some sort of a way to look at the quality of that data other than the actual one person in the field using it at that second. I think that's a great innovation. I believe looking at the utility involvement with satellites is a great new innovation because your project limits are now expanded. Well, your project limits aren't, but your vision is expanded, which allows you to find utilities and to go back in time and track it is really amazing. And we didn't really have those capabilities years ago because our satellites didn't have the right sensors. They didn't have the visual acuity that they have now, and we didn't have as many of them. But now that data is there, and all of that is really facilitated with this cloud-based data management, able to handle more data quicker, faster, and better. As we start to manage that data and add in elements of artificial intelligence, whatever that means to people and however it manifests itself, self learning, I guess, and being able to pick up trends without developing an algorithm to pick up those trends. I think we could find ourselves in another brand new world, um, and hopefully it's a good one that is for benevolent reasons, not malicious reasons.
Do you see any drawbacks in the new technology? One of the things I've been looking at is the lack of understanding of what you're doing and just using automated systems.
Yeah, I think there still has to be somebody who selects the right technology for the project, for the conditions you are encountering, and then somebody has to verify just like we do with geophysics, we do something that we call ground truthing, right? It's you get an image or an inference of something, and you check in a spot to figure out if what you are seeing is the truth or not. And I think we still have to do that. There's a new phrase, relatively new, being thrown out for utility data called a single source of truth, SSOT. And the idea there is, can we have a database somewhere that is the definitive answer to any questions? And I'd say everybody's truth is a little bit different. And if you don't make one person's truth equal to another person's truth, that single source of truth might lead you down the wrong path, because it gives the impression that it is, in fact, reality. And
the correct source, yeah.
We know that may not be the case. So, yeah.
It actually reminds me of a post. We have a fantastic creative person here, and she put up a post about the single source of truth. So if you know what I'm talking about, and look at our LinkedIn page, at the forum LinkedIn page, you'll find a little reference to the single source of truth on a comical basis.
Okay.
No, that's really amazing, Jim. Now, in terms of the new standards, which just came out or are just about to come out, the ASCE 38 and the 75, are they dynamic enough to evolve with technology? And we've seen how quickly technology has changed.
I believe they are.
And evolved.
Yeah, certainly 3802 was very generic and allowed a lot of leeway into how to use that. The newer version, 3822, really is no different in that regard. It allows a lot of leeway in how you arrive at an answer. And that answer is, what quality level can I achieve or was achieved for this particular utility segment? That's really what that standard is about. Putting that together with a robust scope of work results in project development. So you really need the scope of work, which it drives the investigation, which is then filtered through ASCE 38 to arrive at a standardized output. So I can't stress enough that the scope of work is very important in using ASCE 38.
Do you see the ASCE SUE for Municipalities guide, scope of work document also changing to reference ASCE 3822?
I don't believe it ever referenced 3802 directly. It just referenced ASCE 38, with the idea that whatever is changed or updated in ASCE 38 in the future needs to be able to accommodate those types of things. I would imagine that the SUE for Municipalities document will need updating at some point. It's been out there now for 2 years. It's being used. It's not being used a lot, but it's being used some, and there will be feedback coming in and enhancements, I'm sure, to that document going forward by UESI.
What do you think, Jim, might have been left out of the new standard? What else would you have liked to put in the new standard?
Well, certainly there's already discussion on more detail on 3D models. So right now we have an appendix that, as part of the standard, that introduces the topic and some core principles of 3D models, but it really doesn't standardize anything with those, because there just isn't enough experience yet with that to figure out what the correct standard should be. and some of that goes back to, firms that are developing software for BIM, but for instance, Bentley has SUDA, Subsurface Utility Data, whatever the A stands for, which has some flaws in it, that can be corrected individually by the user, but it'd be nice to have it universally corrected by the software. But I don't think we're ready to correct it until we have more experience using those models. So I think that will be something that will be a focus moving forward for future editions of 38. And obviously, as technology changes and grows, we'll have to accommodate that technology, and we may not know what that is yet.
But wouldn't like with 3D, for example, wouldn't the standards stay, like the quality levels, wouldn't they stay the same? Because I think the real challenges is the new sources of utility data, like the new ways to gather utility data, not just project them.
You know, you if you look at a utility in 3D space, it has an X and a Y and a Z, and the quality levels really cover that X and Y position, with the exception of quality level A, where it has been exposed and you can guarantee an accuracy of the entire whatever exposure volume there is, to a certain survey accuracy. You're really getting just a point of that Z value. And we didn't want to get into the situation where every X, Y, and Z point, the billions and billions of them on a project, has a variety or a mix of quality levels for the X, Y, and the Z. Because if you look at that, you could have quality level B in the X, Y, but quality level, M in the Z, whatever that quality level might be in the vertical component. So the way we've addressed that in 3822 is we've addressed the concept of depth as a point attribute on an existing line or feature. So it's just a point. So you string together a bunch of points. Where the issue comes in is the visualization of where that point data came from and its relative uncertainty. And we don't have that figured out yet.
I'm going to ask you another question really attached to this. Jim, with the use of our modern equipment right now, the professional and responsible charge, does he have to really focus on where the data came from or the results?
I think you have to understand where the data came from and how good it is, how reliable it is, how accurate it is. All of that. You still have to do that. Otherwise, you populate this database with potential garbage. You'll never know until you find out, because something went awry on that during construction or operation or maintenance in the future. So I think the professional and responsible charge will always have a role, certainly in project development. Now, if we just look at the issue of making a better utility record from the beginning, maybe there can be some automation that enhances or makes more efficient the responsibilities and the checks and balances that responsible charge person puts forth. We'll have to see. You got to be able to point the finger at somebody. When you're talking about, hundreds of millions of dollars for some of these utility accidents, you have to be able to say this is what went wrong, and this is the party who was grossly negligent or negligent in their responsibilities. So you have to have a person in responsible charge for various aspects of that.
Has there been anyone else along with you that has been leading the charge for this quality and for the integration of the engineering standards?
Well, it's not just me.
We know you as the grandfather of SUE, but
well, yeah, there's
why
lots
don't you
of
elaborate
people.
on no?
There's certainly a whole bunch of people that have contributed and are contributing and will contribute to that moving forward. I would say that a bulk of them are involved in UESI, ASCE, and participation in that organization is kind of why we created that institute within ASCE, is to give the voice to those people that want to lead the charge by example.
Now, it was interesting because you were talking about your current role at the University of Iowa. Can you expand on that in terms of them wanting to educate the future generations of utility engineers?
Yeah, we've had a goal for quite some time to get information, education about utilities, which continue to be one of the leading causes of project delay claims and costs, change orders on infrastructure projects of all kind. So we feel that getting that information to the student, whether that's an undergraduate or a graduate student, is a long-term strategy that we should pursue. Now, just because we have a limited amount of time and a lot of general engineering knowledge that has to be transmitted to students in their 4-year undergraduate setting, we don't have much time within there to talk about utilities. So what we really need to do is develop that graduate program for utility engineers, because right now the only place you learn about utilities as an engineer or a surveyor or a utility company employee is on the job, and we really need to provide a more formalized educational program for that. So at Iowa State, we are looking at starting to create course content at the graduate level or senior elective undergraduate level in the 6 pillars of utility engineering, and going forward from there. We also do a lot of research into utility issues and what might help those issues be resolved in the future. So at Iowa State, my role is twofold. It's research driven and it's education driven, but it's also outreach a little bit and trying to set the example so that other universities can do the same thing.
Now, I don't want to get into it, but can you just give us or state the 6 pillars of utility engineering? Because if we got into it, it would be another 2-hour session. But just a brief overview of the 6 pillars.
Sure. So we have utility investigations, and that's really where ASCE 38 comes into play, is how do you investigate what's already there above ground, below ground, and document it. Then you have utility conflict identification and resolving. And that is looking at how you can work around the existing infrastructure, avoid relocations if possible, avoid utility issues. If you can't avoid them, mitigate them in some fashion. And if you can't mitigate it through a relocation, mitigate it through a policy or through a construction activity. So figuring out how to identify those conflicts and make changes to the design that still accomplish the design mission, but addresses those utility conflicts is a second pillar. The third pillar is utility design. So when you put new utilities in the ground, how do you design them? How do you plan them, route them, and design them so that they can withstand the forces and stresses and they're the right size for whatever population you're serving? Then you have utility construction aspects. So you're actually building these utilities and you are providing utility damage prevention services, and you are capturing the utility data as it goes in the ground. So ASCE 75 is really mostly concerned with that pillar. And then you have the utility asset management pillar, where you look at life cycle costs and when do you repair versus when do you replace something. Pretty much that holistic point. And then the last pillar, for lack of a better term, we'll call utility coordination, but it's really utility program management, because the utilities, we look at those as a program feature of the entire issue of civilization, and we have to coordinate between the owners of that infrastructure and others who are impacting that infrastructure. So those are the 6 pillars: investigation, conflict management, design, construction, asset management, and coordination.
Which pillar do you think has the most impact on the utility risk of a project?
I think they all work together, but I do believe that you can manage that risk most effectively in the utility coordination realm if you are proactive and not just a passive person scheduling meetings and staying out of dispute resolution when two parties both want to do the same thing. Somebody's got to stand up and be the adult in the room and say, this is how it's going to be. So I think the proactive utility coordinator has the most effect totally on the project, because they should be involved early and they should be involved throughout the project construction to some degree, and therefore they can drive the other pillars as needed.
Doesn't it really depend on the project delivery method? Because utility coordination would come in at, well, not really different phases, but micro different phases depending on the project delivery method.
I don't believe that fundamentally there are much differences. There are only differences in the who, the what you do, and how you do it are very similar. It's the who that changes, and even if you look at the when can be flexible no matter what kind of project delivery you have. You try to figure out the particular aspects of that project and make it most efficient for those tasks. So I think project delivery is all about the who.
Now, Jim, talking about your involvement in Iowa State and the SUE school, the last couple of renditions or iterations of SUE school, that is mainly geared for these current SUE professionals, correct? It is not a wide and general call for people to start understanding and using utility engineering and SUE?
Well, I think you're referring to the Utility Investigation School, UIS.
Yeah.
Okay.
Correct.
Yeah. So, we started that effort with the Trenchless Technology Center and UESI to provide that a 40-hour course on this is some of the detail behind conducting a utility investigation, especially if that investigation includes records and knowledge of utility systems and knowledge of geophysics and knowledge of survey and a little bit of hands-on and a fairly rigorous test at the end of that school. And we've held 13 or 14 of them now already around the country, and we have more planned. We're now partnering with different universities around the country, along with the Buried Asset Management Institute International, to deliver these in whatever jurisdiction or state wants it. So the real problem is getting the instructors up to speed with what we're trying to accomplish. But you are somewhat correct in that it was designed for the utility investigation professional. But we've had a wide range of people from construction, trenchless technology aspects, state DOTs also attend that, and their input and participation has been good. I do believe we want to put together such a class or a school for all of the 6 pillars eventually, whether it's a 4-hour course or an 8-hour course or a variety of webinars and workshops and seminars or guided online courses or instruction at a university. I think we need a good mix, but that's our ultimate goal, is to put together content to cover all of those 6 pillars. And of course, some utility design and some asset management, there are already courses out there. So it's a matter of seeing what's out there and adding to it, seeing where the gaps and overlaps are, and adding to it, and creating these opportunities for education. I think the most exciting and relevant educational opportunity that we're trying to put together now is a webinar of some length that would be titled something like what every project manager or engineer needs to know about utilities. And we would talk about the fact that utilities are one of those drivers of their project, and they're not party to any of the contracts usually to deliver the project. So they really have to understand that. And again, since universities don't teach that, somebody needs to pick up the slack, and UESI is looking to do that.
Do you see UESI pushing for regulation or facilitating lobbying for regulation, or like they've done it, not UESI specifically, but the ACEC did with the Colorado law? Do you see that being a more active role of UESI and everyone in the industry?
Well, I think it certainly is a role. I'm not certain that UESI on its own can drive the whole industry or policymakers. So I really think you have to put together a concerted voice for change that would consist of ASCE and ASCE and UESI and APWA and NSPE and all of these professional associations that are out there, and even some of the trade organizations like the SUE Association. They all need to speak with a single voice if you want to get change to happen. And we were able to do that in Colorado, and we're hoping to do that in some other places coming up in the near future.
I'm going to tell you one thing. It seems like you're busier now that you're retired than you were during your professional practice or when you were working for a consulting firm.
Well,
your passion projects are really showing.
I am as busy, but I say no a lot. There's certainly not a lack of things that need done.
Oh, that's interesting.
Like recording podcasts with us.
Yeah,
that you enjoy.
Like getting up at 5 a.m. to do a podcast, but the sun's up now, so I guess the day is.
We've given you a full day.
That's right.
Jim, one last thing. Have you seen the litigation side go up with the awareness of the standards? Because I know you've also done a lot of professional consulting for expert witness testimony regarding standards.
It's coming along. I always thought that case law would have driven the point home faster than it did, and I think the reasons for that is most of these cases settle, and therefore all of the documentation and information becomes proprietary as terms of that settlement. So we don't really learn our lessons from that. Now, we recognize that at ASCE and actually put together a committee called the Committee for Claims Reduction and Management, CCRM, to try to address that not only for utilities, but for civil engineering in general. Firms don't want to tell everybody what they settled for. Insurance companies don't want people to know that. Individuals are embarrassed by their mistakes. But as professionals, we want to learn from other people's mistakes and not make that same mistake. And it's difficult to get that information out because of restrictions in what you can say about these cases. So it's only those cases that go all the way to trial that might, in fact, set case law moving forward. And there aren't that many that move all the way to trial. So it's although it's an important factor, I think in the terms of settlement, we haven't necessarily been able to capitalize in the legal system as much as we could.
All right.
Jim, what looking forward at the industry, what would be one thing you would like to happen in the next 20 years?
I think the best thing that we could do within the next 10 years is have a national policy that any new utility going in the ground has to be accurately surveyed in accordance with ASCE 75. I think that is a necessary component to fixing our utility issues going forward in the most efficient manner.
Okay. So Jim, this has been our third episode, and hopefully not our last. But it was super interesting going with you on this journey from past to present to future. And I think your insights on the industry have given us and our listeners a lot of value and a lot to think about and a lot of homework to do. So I'd like to thank you for that. Phil, last words of the episode.
Yeah, Jim, as always, it's always a pleasure to speak to you. And the amount of knowledge which I retain from every single conversation which I have with you, it's always, if it's refreshing a little item, if it's thinking of a different way of looking at something. And the truth is, what you put out really provides that ability to think about things and really look at them in a new way, which I really enjoy. Now, that being said, I want to see where we're going with all these different standards and where we're doing what we're doing the next 10 years in the industry, and I want to see what your opinion would be in terms of how the things have changed. And I want to be able to talk to you in 10 years and say, yeah, we're here, or no, we still have a lot more distance to cover. And
yeah,
looking at
hopefully I'll still be embodied with a coherent consciousness in 10 years.
I'm always looking forward to even with your coherent consciousness.
Jim, thank you so much. We very much appreciate it.
Thank you.
Until next time.
Hang on, one thing. I want to know, Jim, who do you think should be our next guest to follow you on this podcast?
Wow. Well, that's an interesting interview. I would say if you haven't done a podcast yet with Dr. Cesar Kierga, that might be a good one, because he is really, when he was chair of the Transportation Research Board Utility Committee, and of course he's driving the Texas Transportation Institute utility research and beyond. He's got a lot of insights as to where research is needed in this arena. So I think he would be and he's been involved for a long time. So I think that would be a good interviewee.
Well, I appreciate that, and we know Cesar, and that's a great idea.
There's
Fantastic.
one other person. Now that you're getting my juices flowing here, the managing director of technical programs at ASCE, Jim Rosberg, is retiring in October or maybe August, sometime soon. And either before or after he retires, he has really been a mentor at ASCE for me in figuring out how to get all these things in the mix. And from a very global perspective of ASCE, focused specifically on UESI, and he was in charge of all of the different institutes, but certainly had a big hand in allowing us to form the Utility Engineering and Surveying Institute. He might be an interesting interviewee if he's willing. I don't know that he is.
Well, Jim, would I be able to squeeze an email from you with a brief introduction? Because I've never met the gentleman, and I think I would like to.
I think it'd be a great guest.
Yeah, we can figure out a way to introduce you.
Fantastic. Well, Jim, the only thing I can say is, wow, thank you for sharing your knowledge. And I'm sure that everyone else is going to enjoy absorbing the knowledge. And that's it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir.